I guess I'm going to have to say something. All right. Excuse me. It's on. Stop right here. Save my place. What's going on, guys? It's about 7:19 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Thursday. I still haven't kept up with the news of how many people have died and how many people have survived that building collapse tragedy happening out in Surfside, Miami-Dade County, Florida. Tragedy is an understatement. Tragedy is a complete understatement to say at this point. I had to see the video to see what happened to this building, and it showed a couple of camera angles that let me look at it. And no, I am not an expert in anything, okay? I am not an expert in anything. I don't have any letters or anything else. No specialty. I just observe. But I also noticed that when it comes down for Miami, I've also kept a mental track in my head concerning about their geology itself and how they have experienced sinkholes ever since I was knee-high to a duck. My mother kept putting me through in front of papers and newsstands to the point where at I'm looking at things with a different perspective. Taking geology course and understanding how geology works and natural disasters. Some disasters are avoidable and others aren't. When it comes down for a building collapse, there's usually something structurally wrong with it, either by geology or by something of material. Maybe a deterioration. Or perhaps it was something of a physical assault to it that nobody picked up on. So it'll take a months to get an investigation going to find out what happened. If they'll be digging up any more, well, any more of them, one way or another. And I'm looking at it, and I'm seeing this. I'm like, if it was a sinkhole, there would be a bigger hole in there. So it could not have been a sinkhole. But it had to be something with the structure itself, perhaps support columns or something inside the walls themselves to make it more loose than they actually taught. They were supposed to be going through an inspection. I say every 40 years, their buildings go through inspections. Maybe every 10 years they should have got them, or every 5 years. But in this situation, they were long overdue, and they're due for one. The nature of the panhandle is subject to a lot of destabilization. Of course, with the weather they've got over there, at one time they actually had a thriving agricultural community, and they could depend upon it. But with weather changes left and right, that changed from citrus to amusement parks. But also in the process somewhere, the geology of the panhandle is being changed left and right, not because of man's involvement, but because of probably natural deterioration underground. It changes everything. They've also had hurricanes blast through it and huge storms. When I get solid foundation of the trees for the ground, things get wiped away. Living in the panhandle or living in the south like that is you're taking your lives in your hands. But there were a long time ago Indian tribes, Native American tribes, I should say. I'll make that clarification and distinction there. That they lived out there, tried to thrive out there. And people are still trying to live and thrive out there. The Panhandle and Gulf states. And they deal with their own environmental hazards. Okay, what about the hazards I live out here in Southern California, where the people keep thinking it's all sunny all the damn time? Well, I wish it got to be raining a hell of a lot more. It doesn't. We had thriving agriculture, but we had to depend upon water outside our area. As soon as our water grounds are drying up, we had to suck it out from everybody else to maintain our quote unquote lifestyle out here. And at times I feel like we've already got a billion people out here and up and down the damn coastline. Our agriculture is sucking out water from other sources left and right until they're making our aquifer so damn dry it's not even funny. Dependent upon our sustained economy here is our quote unquote natural resources that we're using up left and right. And we don't have the storms to worry about because our condition out here in the West Coast is we have the high pressures and the low pressures swinging down in either to bake us or to freeze us out, depending what kind of seasons. And because of the temperature changes we've been having for several decades already, been changing like crazy, or shall I say over the century or two because of our own industrial revolution going on. We've been changing the landscape around more and more. Didn't even realize it. Orange trees are not native to California, and yet they got transplanted over here. And then at one time we had an agriculture for that. But there had been natural plants that had been used for agricultural and also for industrial basis. What scares the living crap out of me is not seeing storms coming through. It's seeing the earth move, quite literally. When you're in an energetic meteorological area, meaning if you got storms coming through, they're blasting your ass off with lightning, thunder, wind, rain. You also get mudslides. You also get relocation and shuffling of the topsoil and maybe some of the earth movement, but not much. Of course, you get buildings and houses blown out like crazy. Good tornado coming through a flatline area, if we actually had any, it would be catastrophic, wouldn't it? Of course, we do have a few flatline areas, not many though. We're just mountainous regions and valleys and hills and deep ravines. We have not that much flatline area for convection to happen or wind to happen where we have rotations occurring and then we get tornadoes. But out here in the desert, in the Antelope Valley, in Palm Desert, in Mojave, in Death Valley, dust devils. If it blows just right, if the winds are spinning around, you don't even see the clouds in the air, but you do feel the wind kind of twirling around a little bit. You can see the dust devils blowing around. They're pretty enjoyable when you have a minor one. Go right through you. Hold on to your hats, boys and girls. The larger ones would definitely move a car, but only so much. Of course, it goes against a house or a brick wall, and nothing happens. It just disappears. I've seen that happen too many times. I thought they were pretty damn cool seeing all these dust devils out here in the Antelope Valley until we had more and more development over here. And the houses have become, and the buildings have become more and more obstacles and impediments for the wind. And the wind doesn't have that much energy to blow around. Of course, it blows around all over the place, but in certain areas, it blows like strong corridors because of the way our streets are made. You know, perpendicular to each other. So we have tunnels blowing one way or another right above us or through us. Certain smaller neighborhoods, you can feel a concentrated wind blast through a street than you would through the flatlands because the wind is tunneled by the buildings, acting as direction for the wind to go through. But as I said before, what scares me most, it's not wind as much. We had the wind. We about 20 or 30 or 40. And I'm like, okay, cool. Just hold on to your damn hat. Don't lose it. What gets to me is the movement of the earth. 10 minutes into this recording, this is what I get into, is the geology. Geology isn't exactly a fascinating topic. It's a necessary topic out here in California, and unfortunately, very few people actually look at it that way. And if they actually had looked at it that way, they'd be understanding what kind of a time bomb we live on. We've had the geologists look at the fault lines as much as they could, and as many as they could, taking readings in any and every instance they can. And every time we actually had Earth shift over here, they've been trying to get more and more data all the damn time. They'd read the strata and tell you whether or not we've actually had recent or in the past. By doing some measurements, they would give a rough estimate on how many. They would give you a rough estimate on duration of quakes that we've been having over here. How long between shakes. Certain fault lines we have underneath the earth, underneath our surface over here, are hidden. We see the mountain ranges. We already see some of the fault lines right there as it is. And that's what's scary as hell. The Santa Monica Mountains that we have, the San Gabriels, the Andreas fault line. The mountain ranges, if you looked at the map of, just do the Google map on it and just look at the earth. Notice the contours of it. Notice the shape of it. The dips, the ragged peaks, the jagged peaks, the thrusts, and the deepest inclines that you've ever seen. And in California, especially in our area, we have fault lines left and right. In areas in the San Joaquin Valley, in San Fernando Valley, in the Antelope Valley, we'd have sediment coming from the rocks sliding all over the damn place, and they would call it sedimentary rock. Layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. But it's those mountain ranges that actually house the fault lines that are generating it. Some of them actually, they do have their own time schedule. We're still having a hard time trying to identify it. When they shake, they shake. And they disturb a lot of dirt, and they disturb a lot of property, they disturb a lot of people's rattled nerves, and change lives forever. More ways than one. People who have gotten used to their artificial edifices, their artificial constructs, their neighborhoods that they got so used to they took it for granted, changed forever. Buildings that they shopped or lived in. People that they used to know. I've had my fair share of those quakes since 71. Wasn't fun, wasn't pretty. 4 majors, but then the minor ones usually scare the living crap out of you, unless you're so used to those that you don't even aware of them. They got about 3 or 4, and people start freaking out like they're freaking out left and right, and I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. 3 or 4 in magnitude? You kidding me? Give me a break. Let me sleep through those. Give me a 5. Okay, pay attention a little bit and then go back to sleep. 6 will do your relocation like crazy. 7, say goodbye to your life forever. 8, don't even think about it or talk about it. 9, impossibility. 10, you're doomed. We haven't had a 10 We haven't had a 9. At least not a lot of people have been predicting it. We've came close to 8s or more than that, but then that has shifted down a bit. Politics and finances. It seemed there was an unwritten rule somewhere out there passed along and talked about for decades that the 94 earthquake was more than an 8 because it did a lot of damage. Well, so did the Sylmar quake in 71. But Northridge was a hell of a lot worse because this one, nobody knew this one was coming. Nobody knew the fault line was there. It was a hidden lateral thrust fault. And this thing shook us. We didn't get elevation. We got devastation out of it. And think about earthquakes. We don't know on the geologic time when the earth moves and recycles its rocks. But we know the process. They've hypothesized it, but they've also been observing it. Just the process is so damn slow in certain circumstances that it goes beyond human fathoming at this point over here. And then some processes are so damn quick, there's no way to predict it. Unlike meteorological. In certain areas of the Atlantic, along the equatorial border areas, actually right along it, even in the Pacific, we can see the clouds and the storms building up. Enough moisture, rain, and enough heat energy building those storms up to where they spin off and cause more havoc and chaos down the road, sometimes giving areas relief when they need it, or not. But because we're changing the atmosphere so damn much with our own technology, with our own industries, we're changing the heat, we're changing the dynamics, and we're still having a hard time trying to figure things out. However, even with the storms going through, people are more acutely aware of the damage that they can do on flat lines, and not to mention on areas close to the water. All that heat and energy floating around in the Caribbean and along the Atlantic equatorial area, storms coming from the continent of Africa area building up in the waters and then flying off to the west, whether they hit the South America, but probably not because of the trade winds and the currents running. And we get the storms like crazy. We get the hurricanes like crazy, knocking the crap out of the East Coast. First the South, then the East Coast. And even with all the storms hitting in, we get tornado warnings. They can see the energy coming through. They can make preparations for it. They can see the storms on storm trackers. They can see it on radar. They can see it in the sky. They can see it coming. Geology is different because it's underneath you. It's always under a constant motion, but sometimes that motion is in a different time schedule that we don't even understand. You take a piece of rock from the ground. You look at it. Jagged, rounded, nice little flex. Maybe has some bands in it. Toss it out. Doesn't mean a damn thing to you. Another guy picks it up, looks at it, and says, "They're not supposed to be here." You turn around and look at this guy, and he's looking at the rock, and he looks at you strangely and says, "This rock isn't supposed to be here." "It's just a rock." It doesn't tell you anything, does it? It's just a rock. Yeah, why is it here? It's here. General public right there. Because they don't know, they don't care, they don't understand, they don't want to care. Geology is a science that people have to understand the language. It's not exactly the terminology for geology. It's understanding the language of the earth, the ground itself that they're living on. The foundations that they dig up and reprocess and reformulate to build their buildings and edifices out of. the living Earth itself. I keep telling people that they're lucky they can see the disaster is coming, but we do not, and we should, and we don't. The ground underneath your feet, eventually, or one day, will suck you under, and you don't even realize it. There'll be a sinkhole, and there you go. Depending upon how big the hole is and how it's created and how fast it's being dissolved, is you're going to be having that much of a success rate trying to get the hell out of there and live. How's that for a nightmare for you? And no, they're not fantasy, they're not fallacy, they're not fake news either. It's a well-known fact. Different places are coming up with sinkholes left and right all around us, in different areas that we don't even realize. There are certain minerals that are dissolved by this fluid. 2 oxygen atoms and 1 hydrogen. Actually 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. H2O. Right? Okay. 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen makes up a water molecule. A bunch of water molecules has your fluid basis here. There are certain minerals out there that are created out of dead animals. The bones have turned into a mineral themselves and get compacted into the earth, and more and more and more. Limestone made. Limestone is dissolved by water. The water is like an acid to it. It dissolves it. You don't see it happening these days, but enough time and pressure in the earth and it turns into a mineral where things are dissolved. Now, if there is any limestone or minerals similar to that, and enough moisture is in the water table, it starts eating away at it, and then you get your cavity building up and building up. And sometimes it reaches up to the surface. Try that one. Without you even realizing it. See, the earth scares the hell out of me. The ground scares the hell out of me. Because this is also a natural process. Millions of years ago, when we actually had other life forms walking around the earth and different plants, they die off and their remains are being processed and subducted and torn apart and changed and mutated with time and pressure and maybe a bit of heat in there. Doesn't turn it into ashes, it just changes the chemical composition into different rocks that either we use on a constant basis or that we haven't even got to yet. The pumice that you have, that you use in your teeth, or use in baking soda, came from the earth. Pumice itself is also, I think, dissolvable. You give enough water in a damn thing, it'll just dissolve like crazy. But the rock is still there. Actually, I'll take that back. The pumice doesn't dissolve, but there are other minerals, other rocks with it will, because they're chemically treated by the earth, and by time and by pressure. Which reminds me, I still need to go back to a geology class just to get a refresher. This is what happens when you go to college at an older date. If you're at a younger date, maybe you can retain the knowledge a hell of a lot better than an older one. So I need to go back again and again just to get my head updated on stuff like this. But suffice it to say, even the shifting of the earth itself by the convection process that the earth has, the internal heat source, our core, theoretically as a molten figure, but a dynamic engine that's constantly renewing itself. It's taking the rocks and renewing itself and spitting things out. It has a layer of it where the process is being taken care of. It's called a mantle. And above that, you've got the surface. And it's the surface issues we have problems with because the mantle is pushing up the recycled rock up and sucking in all the old stuff back down so it can get reprocessed all over again, generated by the heat of the Earth's core. We have zones in the ocean that can suck in the rock. It takes a long time, but they suck it in and get it reprocessed and shuffled around through the mixture in a mantle. You never know where it comes up until it comes up somewhere else. Maybe in a local volcano, or maybe thousands and thousands of miles away, it come in through another pass where it's a spreading center instead of a subduction zone. Subduction zone, you suck the sucker in, get a layer of rock right here, and it goes over time, over geologic time. It's not human time. Human time is a lot faster than geologic time. Geology deals with a lot of patience. Humanity doesn't. Take a look at a rock. Just take a look at it. Jagged, smooth. Jagged means it's probably got fractured somewhere. Either by a quarry or by something else got chipped off. Maybe a bit of shaking. Transported by wind or by some other means to be placed in your area. Now, if it's rounded, that means that thing's been kicked around for a hell of a long while, rounded by wind and by water action as well, to make its unique shape. And sometimes you don't know what kind of rock you're looking at either. One of these here days, you just got to try that. But understand this, the rocks that you see on top may not be the same ones you're looking at underneath, or sucking people left and right in sinkholes, or spewing out rocks like Kilauea, Vesuvius, Etna, the volcanoes out in Mexico, Mount St. Helens. Geology has scared the crap out of me and fascinated me at the same time because I never liked earthquakes. I never liked the process of the earth itself because it scared the hell out of me. It's unpredictable. It's unpredictable. It's contradicting because we think we see the dynamic forces of nature in its atmosphere with the tornadoes and the hurricanes. We think we know nature. We sure as hell don't know. Geology can change in an instant, or it can do it by a long period of time. But it's unpredictable. It's like Mother Nature in her own course. So, pay this and keep this in mind and be respectful to your environment. You never know when your environment may come up and do something that you're going to not like.